Katie Morgan had stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council many times before. She knew every curve of the ancient walls, every flickering light that hung from the ceiling like captured stars. She knew the faces of the 12 species that sat in their high seats, looking down at whoever came to speak. For 63 years, humanity had been part of this council. They had earned their place through hard work, through trade, through helping others solve their problems. Katie had spent 15 years of her life building bridges between worlds that had never trusted each other before. But today, everything felt different. Today, the air in the chamber felt cold. She stood alone in the center of the floor. Behind her, through the massive windows, ships moved slowly through the darkness of space. The Nexus Station was the heart of galactic civilization. Millions of beings lived here, worked here, dreamed here. And somewhere far away, on a small world called New Cascadia, 40,000 humans were fighting for their lives. The Cathari swarm had attacked without warning. Their ships had appeared in the sky 3 days ago, burning cities and killing anyone who tried to run. The colony had no real military. They were farmers, scientists, teachers. They had children who had never seen Earth, who had been born under alien stars and called New Cascadia home. Katie took a slow breath and spoke clearly into the silence. I am here to formally request military aid under Article 7 of the Council Charter, she said. Her voice did not shake. She had practiced these words 100 times. The Cathari swarm has launched an unprovoked attack on our colony. 40,000 of our people are in danger. We ask our allies to honor the mutual defense agreement that every species in this chamber has signed. She stopped speaking and waited. The silence stretched on. High Councilor Valith of the Sonari sat in the highest seat. She was ancient, even by the standards of her long-lived species. Her skin was pale blue, and her eyes were like pools of silver water. She had led the council for over 200 years. When she spoke, everyone listened. We have received your request, Ambassador Morgan, Valith said. Her voice was soft but carried through the entire chamber. The council will now vote. Katie watched as each representative made their choice. The Tovali voted no. The Greth voted no. The Molokai, who had once called humans their closest friends, voted no. One by one, all 12 elder species rejected humanity's call for help. Katie felt something break inside her chest. It was not anger. Not yet. It was something deeper. It was the death of trust. Valith spoke again. The council has decided that the human colony of New Cascadia is strategically insignificant. We cannot risk galactic stability for a single world. The vote is final. Strategically insignificant. Katie repeated the words in her mind. 40,000 lives. Children hiding in basements while their world burned. And they were strategically insignificant. She wanted to scream. She wanted to demand justice. She wanted to remind them of every time humanity had answered their calls for help. When the Tovali faced famine, human ships had brought food. When the Sonari plague spread across 3 systems, human doctors had worked without sleep for months to find a cure. When the Greth and the Molokai had been ready to destroy each other, human diplomats had spent years building a peace that still held today. But Katie said none of these things. She had learned something important in her years of service. Words meant nothing to people who had already made up their minds. We understand, she said simply. We will remember. She turned and walked out of the chamber. She did not look back. Far away, on the bridge of the carrier Resolute, Admiral Sam Hartley received the news. He was a large man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served in the human fleet for 40 years. He had seen battles and peace treaties and everything in between. But he had never felt as alone as he did in that moment. They refused, his communications officer said quietly. All 12 species voted against us. Sam stared at the screen, showing the distant light of New Cascadia's star. 40,000 people. His people. And the galaxy had abandoned them. "Get me Commander Cruz on New Cascadia," he said. The connection took a few minutes to establish. When the face of Nathan Cruz appeared on the screen, Sam could see the exhaustion in his eyes. Nathan was young, only 32, but he looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. Behind him, Sam could hear the sound of explosions and screaming. "Admiral," Nathan said, "please tell me you have good news." Sam shook his head slowly. "The Council refused to help. We're on our own, son." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Understood, sir. We'll hold as long as we can. Reinforcements from Earth are coming, but it will take time. Can you hold for 3 weeks?" Nathan looked at something off-screen. Sam heard a child crying somewhere in the background. "We'll hold, sir. These are our people. This is our home. We're not going anywhere." The connection ended, and Sam sat alone with the weight of what was coming. On the Nexus station, Katie Morgan returned to the human embassy. Her staff was waiting, their faces filled with hope that turned to horror when they saw her expression. "Start packing," she said quietly. "Everything. Every document, every file, every piece of art on the walls. I want this embassy empty within the year." Her assistant, a young man named Peter Grant, stepped forward. "Ambassador, what happened? What did they say?" Katie looked at him. She thought about the Council. She thought about 63 years of friendship and cooperation. She thought about all the times humanity had given and given and given. "They showed us who they really are," she said. "And now we're going to show them who we really are." She walked to her office window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, her people were dying, and the galaxy had turned its back. But humanity would not forget. Humanity would not forgive. And most importantly, humanity would not beg. The Council had made their choice. Now they would live with it. Katie sat down at her desk and began to write. The first of many messages that would change the course of history. The words were simple, sent to every human official across the galaxy. Begin quiet preparations for full withdrawal. No announcements. No explanations. When we leave in silence. The betrayal was complete. What came next would be remembered for 1,000 years. The skies above New Cascadia burned orange and red. Commander Nathan Cruz stood on the roof of the colony's main hospital, watching enemy ships move through the clouds like angry wasps. He had 3 frigates, 200 soldiers, and 10,000 civilians who could hold a weapon. Against him, the Cathari had brought 40 warships and an army of 50,000. The math was simple. The math said they should surrender. The math said they should die. Nathan had never been good at math. "Commander," his radio crackled. "Enemy forces are pushing towards Sector 7. We can't hold much longer." Nathan raised his binoculars and looked toward the eastern hills. He could see the flashes of gunfire, the smoke rising from burning buildings. Sector 7 was the farming district. 3,000 people lived there, mostly families with young children. "Pull back to the secondary line," he ordered. "Get the civilians into the underground shelters. Every person who can walk carries a child who can't." "Yes, sir." Nathan climbed down from the roof and ran toward his command vehicle. His uniform was torn and covered in dust. He had not slept in 4 days. But he could not stop. If he stopped, people died. The battle for New Cascadia lasted 19 days. In those 19 days, Nathan and his people did things that should have been impossible. They fought in the asteroid fields above the colony, using small civilian ships to confuse the enemy sensors. They set traps in the forests, digging tunnels that collapsed under enemy vehicles. They used fake radio signals to make the Cathari think human forces were everywhere at once. Lisa Vance, a cargo pilot who had never fired a weapon before the attack, learned to fly her transport ship like a fighter. She made 17 supply runs through enemy lines, bringing food and medicine to cut off civilian groups. On her 18th run, she was shot down. She survived the crash, walked 15 kilometers through enemy territory, and made it back to base carrying a wounded child on her back. Old George Miller, a retired engineer who was 73 years old, worked for 16 hours straight to repair a broken shield generator. When Cathari soldiers broke into his workshop, he fought them with a welding torch and a metal pipe. He killed 3 of them before his own people could reach him. He survived, though he lost his left arm. A schoolteacher named Maria Santos organized the children in the underground shelters. She turned the dark tunnels into classrooms, teaching songs and stories to keep the little ones calm while bombs fell above their heads. Years later, those children would remember her voice more than they remembered the war. These were ordinary people, farmers and doctors and shopkeepers. They had never wanted to be heroes, but when their world needed them, they became something more than they had ever imagined. On the 15th day, reinforcements arrived from Earth. Captain Lisa Vance, now flying a real military fighter, was part of the squad that met them at the edge of the system. The destroyer Yellowstone led a fleet of 12 ships, everything that Earth could spare on short notice. The tide of the battle began to turn. The Cathari had expected an easy victory. They had expected the humans to break and run. They had not expected this. They had not expected people who would rather die than abandon their home. On the 19th day, Nathan Cruz made his final decision. His frigate, the Morning Star, was badly damaged. The engines were failing. The weapons were nearly empty. But the Cathari command ship was right in front of him, coordinating the entire enemy fleet. If he could destroy it, the battle would be over. All hands, abandon ship, Nathan ordered calmly. Get to the escape pods. That's an order. His crew protested, but he would not listen. One by one, they left. Only Nathan remained on the bridge, his hands steady on the controls. The Morning Star accelerated toward the enemy command ship. The Cathari tried to shoot him down, but he was too fast, too determined. In the last seconds, Nathan thought about his home. He thought about his parents back on Earth, about the sunsets on New Cascadia, about all the things he would never see again. The impact destroyed both ships instantly. When the Cathari saw their command vessel explode, they panicked. Without leadership, their fleet fell apart. The human ships, led by the Yellowstone, pushed them back and back until they fled into deep space. New Cascadia was saved. But the cost was terrible. 12,000 people dead. Half the colony destroyed. Commander Nathan Cruz, who had held the line when no one else could, was gone, while the colony buried its dead and began to rebuild. A quiet investigation was happening far from the public eye. Danny Reyes was an intelligence officer stationed on the Nexus. His job was to gather information, to watch and listen and remember. In the weeks after the battle, he noticed something strange. The Cathari had known exactly where to attack. They had known the patrol schedules, the weak points in the defense grid, the locations of civilian shelters. Someone had given them this information. Someone on the council. Danny spent months digging through encrypted files and secret communications. What he found made his blood run cold. The attack on New Cascadia was not random. Several council species had been worried about humanity's growing influence. They saw humans as a threat, as newcomers who were rising too fast. So they had made a quiet agreement with the Cathari. They would provide information and look the other way. In return, the Cathari would weaken humanity's expansion. The Council had not just refused to help. They had helped the enemy. Danny sent his report directly to Admiral Hartley and Ambassador Morgan. He expected anger. He expected demands for war, for justice, for revenge. Instead, Katie Morgan read the report in silence. Then she looked up at the Admiral. "No accusations," she said quietly. "No threats. No demands. We simply leave." Sam Hartley nodded slowly. He understood. War would cost more lives. Accusations would lead to endless debates in the council chambers. The guilty would never admit their crimes. But silence. Silence was something they would not expect. Silence would hurt them far more than any weapon. "When do we begin?" Sam asked. "We already have," Katie replied. "Every human in the galaxy received the order 3 months ago. We're leaving, Sam, all of us. And we're not going to explain why." She turned to look out the window at the stars. "They wanted us gone. We're going to give them exactly what they wanted. And then they're going to learn what the galaxy looks like without us." Somewhere in the distance, a human transport ship quietly undocked from the Nexus station and headed for home. It was the first of thousands. The quiet war was over. The quiet withdrawal had begun. Nobody noticed at first. That was the genius of it. Humanity did not leave with anger or drama. They left like water slowly draining from a bathtub. By the time anyone realized what was happening, most of the water was already gone. Dr. Claire Osman had worked on the Nexus station for 20 years. She was a specialist in alien medicine, one of the few humans who understood how to treat dozens of different species. She had saved thousands of lives. She had delivered babies of species that reproduced in ways she could never have imagined. She had held the hands of dying patients from worlds she would never visit. On a quiet Tuesday morning, she began packing her belongings. Her office was small but full of memories. Pictures of patients who had become friends. Thank you cards written in languages she could barely read. A small plant from the Torvali homeworld that she had somehow kept alive for 15 years. She put everything into boxes. She did not hurry. She did not cry. She simply packed, one item at a time, as if she was doing nothing more important than cleaning her desk. Dr. Veth, a Sonari colleague who had worked beside her for a decade, found her as she was sealing the last box. "Claire, what are you doing?" he asked. His voice was confused, almost frightened. "Are you leaving?" She looked at him with calm eyes. "Yes, Veth, I'm going home. But why? Did something happen? Did someone offend you? I can speak to the station director. We can fix whatever is wrong." Claire smiled sadly. It was the smile of someone who had already said goodbye in their heart. "Nothing is wrong," she said. "And everything is wrong. Our people asked for help when we were dying. The council refused. We understand now that we were never truly part of this family. We were guests who stayed too long. But that was politics," Beth protested. "That was the council, not us. I never voted against you. I never wanted harm to come to your people." "I know," Claire said. "And I don't blame you personally, Beth. But I can't stay in a place where my people are considered insignificant. I can't smile and work and pretend that nothing happened. Every human feels the same way. We're not leaving because we hate you. We're leaving because we finally understand our place here. We have no place here." She picked up her boxes and walked toward the door. Beth followed her, still trying to find words that would make her stay. "What about your patients? What about the research we were doing together? What about everything we built?" Claire stopped at the door and looked back at him. "I have written detailed notes on all my patients. I have shared all my research. Everything I know, I have left behind. You will not suffer because of my absence. That is the human way. We do not leave chaos behind us. We leave everything in perfect order." Then she was gone, all across the galaxy. Similar scenes played out thousands of times, Human engineers left the jump gate stations that they had helped build and maintain for decades. They gave complete technical documents to their colleagues. They explained every system, every wire, every circuit. They answered every question patiently and thoroughly. Then they packed their bags and caught transport ships heading toward Soul Space. Human teachers in alien schools finished their final lessons. They recommended new teachers to replace them. They hugged their students goodbye and told them to work hard and be kind. They did not explain why they were leaving. They simply left. Human traders closed their shops and offices. They settled all their debts. They paid the workers fairly. They donated unsold goods to local charities. Then they disappeared, leaving empty storefronts behind. Human diplomats politely declined every invitation. They stopped attending meetings. They stopped answering calls about disputes between other species. When asked why, they gave vague answers about internal matters and restructuring of priorities. They never accused anyone. They never demanded anything. They just stopped participating. On the Nexus station, Ambassador Katie Morgan supervised the emptying of the human embassy. It had taken nearly a year, but now the building was just a shell. The art was gone from the walls. The furniture had been sold or shipped home. The files had been transferred or destroyed. She walked through the empty halls one last time. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. She remembered the first time she had entered this building as a young diplomat, so full of hope and excitement. She had believed in the council then. She had believed in friendship between species. She had believed that trust and hard work would be rewarded. Now she believed in nothing but her own people. High Counselor Valeth came to see her on the final day. The ancient Sonari stood in the empty lobby, looking lost and uncomfortable. Ambassador Morgan, she said, I came to ask you to reconsider. The Council values humanity's contribution. We want you to stay. Katie looked at her for a long moment. Do you know why humans are different from most species, Counselor? Valeth shook her head. We remember, Katie said simply. We are not the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most advanced. But we remember everything. Every kindness. Every insult. Every promise kept, and every promise broken. We remember for generations. We teach our children to remember. And when we have been hurt badly enough, we do not seek revenge. Revenge is messy and loud and satisfying for only a moment. Instead, we simply remove ourselves from the situation. We leave. And we never, ever forget. Is there nothing I can say to change your mind? No, Counselor. There is nothing anyone can say. The time for words was when our people were dying. Now, the only language we speak is action. Katie walked past her and out into the station corridor. Behind her, Valith stood alone in the empty building, surrounded by silence. Within 2 years, every human in Council space had returned home. The Great Migration was complete. Communications relays went dark. Border stations stopped responding. Trading routes that had been busy for decades fell silent. The galaxy continued to turn. The Council continued to meet. But something was missing. Something important. The species of the Council did not understand what it was yet. They would not understand for a long time. Humanity was gone. And they had taken something with them that could not be measured or counted or replaced. They had taken trust. They had taken goodwill. They had taken 63 years of friendship and cooperation, and the bill for that loss was about to come due. The first jump gate failed 6 months after the last human engineer left. It was a small gate, connecting 2 minor trade routes in the outer regions. When it stopped working, the Council sent their best Sonari technicians to fix it. They arrived with confidence, carrying the complete technical documents that the humans had left behind. 3 weeks later, they still had not figured out the problem. The documents were perfect. Every wire was labeled. Every system was explained. But the Sonari technicians had spent centuries looking down on human engineering. They had called it crude and simple. They had never bothered to actually learn how it worked. Now, faced with that crude and simple technology, they could not understand it. The problem was not that human engineering was complex. The problem was that it was elegant. Humans had found ways to make things work with fewer parts, fewer resources, fewer complications. Where other species built machines with 1,000 components, humans built the same machines with 100. But those 100 components worked together in ways that required a deep understanding to maintain. The gates stayed broken. Trade slowed. Prices rose. People on distant worlds waited for supplies that never came. More gates failed. Then more. Within 2 years, 15% of the jump gate network was offline. The Council's economy, which had depended on fast and reliable transportation, began to crumble. But the gates were only the beginning. The Volmer plague appeared on the Sonari homeworld in the 3rd year after the human withdrawal. It was a new disease, something that had mutated in the crowded cities of their capital. It spread quickly and killed slowly. Victims could walk and talk for weeks while the sickness ate them from inside. High Counselor Valeth sent emergency messages to every medical expert in the galaxy. She called old allies and new friends. She offered money and favors and promises. But the best medical minds in the galaxy all gave her the same answer. They did not understand cross-species diseases well enough to help. For 300 years, human doctors had been essential to managing outbreaks that crossed species boundaries. Humans had a natural talent for understanding how diseases moved between different types of life. They had saved millions of lives across dozens of worlds. But now there were no human doctors left in Council space. Valeth sent messages to the human border. She begged for help. She apologized for the past. She offered anything they wanted in return. The humans did not respond. Their communication relays stayed dark. Their border stations stayed silent. The plague spread to 3 more Sonari worlds before it finally burned itself out. 2 million people died. Vila's daughter was among them. Meanwhile, the old hatreds that human diplomats had kept under control began to surface. The Tavali and the Greth had nearly destroyed each other in a war centuries ago. Human negotiators had spent years building a peace treaty between them. Every decade, human diplomats met with both sides to resolve new disputes before they could grow into violence. It was delicate work, requiring patience and understanding that most species did not have. Without humans to maintain the peace, the old wounds reopened. A border dispute over a mining asteroid turned into a trade embargo. The embargo turned into naval maneuvers. The maneuvers turned into shooting. Within a year, the Tavali and the Greth were at full war. Millions died in space battles and planetary bombardments. Refugee ships filled the travel lanes, carrying people who had lost everything. The Council tried to intervene, but no one would listen. Both sides blamed the other. Both sides demanded justice. Neither side would accept compromise from a council they no longer trusted. The Ketheri, who had started all of this with their attack on New Cascadia, watched the chaos with hungry eyes. With the galaxy distracted by war and plague and economic collapse, they expanded aggressively into former council territory. They took world after world, enslaving populations and stripping planets of resources. No one had the strength to stop them. In the middle of this storm, there was one human left in council space. His name was Ben Cho. He had been a minor diplomat, nothing important. When the withdrawal order came, he had refused to leave. He had renounced his citizenship and stayed behind, believing that the council was his true home. Now he sat in a small apartment on the Nexus station, watching the news feeds that showed a galaxy falling apart. A Sonari journalist came to interview him. desperate for any insight into the human mind. Why? She asked him. Why did they leave so quietly? Why not fight? Why not demand justice for what was done to them? Ben looked out his window at the stars. He had aged badly in the past few years, living among species who whispered about humanity's betrayal, who blamed the humans for leaving, had broken something in him. He regretted his decision to stay every single day. "You still don't understand," he said quietly. "You think this was about anger. You think this was about revenge. It wasn't. Then what was it? It was a calculation. Humans are very good at calculating." We looked at our relationship with the council, and we asked a simple question. What do we gain by staying, and what do we lose? He turned to face the journalist. The answer was clear. We gained nothing. You took our help for granted. You used our skills without respecting us. When we needed you, you abandoned us. So we calculated the cost of leaving, and we found that we had nothing left to lose. But surely you miss us? Surely you need the trade, the resources, the connections? Ben laughed, but there was no humor in it. Humans are adaptable. We survived for millions of years on a single planet before we ever met your species. We will survive without you. The question is whether you will survive without us. The interview was broadcast across the galaxy. Billions of beings heard Ben's words. Most of them were angry. Some of them were sad. A few of them, the wisest ones, were afraid, because they were beginning to understand something that the Council had never wanted to admit. Humanity had not been a minor member of galactic civilization. They had been the glue holding it together. And without that glue, everything was falling apart. The unraveling had only just begun. 5 years. That was how long it took for the Galactic Council to realize that they were dying. The Great Hall that had once held 12 proud species now held only 11. The Molokai had withdrawn after their economy collapsed. Their seats sat empty, a reminder of what was lost. The Tavali and the Greth had destroyed each other in their war. Both species still existed, but they were shadows of what they had been. Too broken and poor to participate in galactic politics. High Counselor Valeth sat in her ancient seat and looked down at the chamber. She was old now, older than she had ever expected to become. Her daughter was dead from the plague. Her friends had turned against her. Every day, someone new demanded that she answer for the decision to abandon humanity 5 years ago. The decision that she had made. The vote that she had led. Outside the chamber, the galaxy burned. The Gethari controlled nearly a third of former council space. Trade had dropped by 40%. Species that had lived in peace for centuries now fought over scraps. And somewhere beyond the dark border, humanity waited in silence. Valeth had tried everything. She had sent messages. She had sent ambassadors. She had sent gifts and apologies and promises. The humans never responded. Their border stayed closed. Their communication channels stayed silent. Finally, she made a decision. She would go herself. Her advisors told her it was foolish. Her doctors told her she was too weak to travel. Her political enemies told her she was running away from her failures. She ignored them all. She took a single ship and flew to the human border. It was a long journey through space that had once been busy with trade ships and passenger liners. Now it was empty, dead. The stations along the way were abandoned. The jump gates were dark. It felt like traveling through a graveyard. When she reached the border, she stopped her ship and began to broadcast. "I am High Counselor Valeth of the Sonari. I come in peace. I come to apologize. I come to ask humanity to return to the Galactic Council." She waited for hours. Nothing happened. The stars stared back at her, cold and uncaring. Then, finally, a ship appeared. It was a human destroyer, sleek and modern and armed with weapons she did not recognize. It moved toward her with the quiet confidence of a predator that knows it has no natural enemies. When it stopped beside her ship, a communication channel opened. High Counselor Valeth. The voice was calm, professional, emotionless. I am Captain Ryan Cole of the Seoul Defense Fleet. Admiral Eric Tanner sends his regards. Captain Cole, Valeth said. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the fear she tried to hide. I have come to speak with your leaders. I carry a formal apology from the Galactic Council. We want humanity to return. We want to make things right. There was a long pause. Valeth could imagine the humans on the other ship, exchanging glances, perhaps even laughing at her. She had never felt so small. Please wait, Cole said finally. I will consult with my superiors. The channel went silent. Valeth waited for 3 days. She slept in her chair. She ate emergency rations. She stared out her window at the human destroyer that watched her like a guard watching a prisoner. She thought about all the decisions that had led her to this moment. She thought about the vote that had condemned New Cascadia. She thought about the 12,000 humans who had died because she had called them strategically insignificant. She thought about her daughter, who had died because there were no human doctors left to save her. On the 3rd day, the communication channel opened again. High Counselor, Captain Cole said. I have a response from President Maria Gutierrez and the Unified Human Parliament. I am listening, Valeth said. I am sending you a data package now. It contains humanity's official response to your request. Valeth downloaded the file with shaking hands. It was small, barely a few pages. She had expected arguments and negotiations and demands. Instead, she found only a letter. She read it once. Then she read it again. Then she sat in silence for a very long time. The letter said, We accept your apology. We decline your invitation. Humanity has spent 60 years learning to stand with the galaxy. We will now spend however long is necessary learning to stand without it. We bear no hatred toward the Council or its member species. Hatred requires energy and attention, and we choose to spend both on building our own future. The children born since our withdrawal have never known the Galactic Council. They do not miss what they never had. They are growing up in a civilization that depends on no one but itself. They are strong and proud and free. When your council has proven itself worthy of trust, not through words, but through generations of demonstrated integrity, our descendants may reconsider. Until then, we wish you well. This is not a closing door. It is simply an honest assessment of where we stand. You taught us that we could only rely on ourselves. We have learned that lesson well. Perhaps too well to ever forget it. Go in peace. Build a better council. Teach your children to be worthy of trust. And perhaps, in 100 years or 1,000, our grandchildren will meet as equals. Until then, goodbye. Valeth's ship turned around and flew back toward the dying council. Behind her, the human destroyer watched until she disappeared from their sensors. Then it too turned and went home. The news of humanity's response spread across the galaxy within hours. Valeth stood before the council and read the letter aloud. When she finished, the chamber was silent. No one argued. No one protested. There was nothing to say. On the human side of the border, life went on. Cities grew taller. Ships explored the vast empty spaces beyond council territory, finding new worlds and new wonders. Children were born who would never know what it felt like to be rejected by the galaxy. They only knew what it felt like to be free. The humans did not celebrate their isolation. They did not mourn it either. They simply accepted it as the natural result of actions they had not taken and choices they had not made. The council had wanted them gone. Now they were gone, and every day, for the rest of their lives, the species of the council would look at the dark border where humanity had disappeared. They would remember the help that was no longer offered. They would remember the friends that were no longer there. They would remember that the quietest punishment was often the worst. Humanity had not destroyed the council. They had simply let the council destroy itself. And that was a lesson the galaxy would remember forever.